Hi, good evening, everybody. We're about to start. So welcome to members of the public and councillors. You'll have to hear me go through some stuff about if you start running, follow me in the event of emergency. To the core of the business. So in the event of an emergency, there are no practice alarms planned for this evening. If an alarm sounds, please evacuate the town hall, going down the main staircase or the back staircase by the high street, and then to the car park behind the town hall in St Runwald Street. This meeting is being broadcast live over the internet on the council's YouTube channel. Will also be available to listen to afterwards. The use of mobile phones and other devices, including cameras by visitors, is welcome, but you're requested to use them discreetly, to set them to silent, and to use voice or camera flash functions. Use of mobile phones and other devices, I've done that. Speakers are reminded microphones are to be used at all times. Introduction to the work of the council will follow. For those who don't know, the Cabinet is the main executive body of the council, which is responsible for day-to-day decision-making on all council services and makes recommendations to full council on major policy issues and on the council's budget. The Cabinet makes 8 councils, each of whom is responsible for a particular range of services. I'll introduce myself and then my colleagues will do the same. So my name is the King, leader of the council. I go to my right.
Thank you very much, David. Good evening, everybody. Councillor Adam Fox, Deputy Leader of the Council and Portfolio Holder for the Local Economy Council Transformation.
Good evening, everybody. Councillor Mark Corey, Portfolio Holder for Resources.
Good evening, Councillor Luxford Vaughan, Portfolio Holder for Planning and Infrastructure.
Evening, I'm Martin Goss. I'm the Councillor for Neighbourhood Services and Waste, and also a Mile End Ward Councillor.
Good evening, I'm Pam Cox. I'm Ward Councillor for Newtown and Christchurch and Portfolio Holder for Culture and Heritage.
Richard Clifford, Democratic Services Manager.
Andrew Weavers, Monitoring Officer.
Pam Lee, Chief Executive.
I thank and welcome other officers in support. 2 Cabinet members are not able to join today, long-standing holidays. So Councillor Steph Nissen and Councillor Julie Young. We hear their voice and we will talk to their items and issues during the course of the year. So to the agenda itself, item 2, urgent items.
There are no urgent items, Chair.
Thank you. Item 3 is declarations of interest. I invite my Cabinet colleagues to declare any relevant interests. They are interested in the business. Item 4, the minutes of the last Cabinet. This Cabinet approves them. It doesn't raise issues arising. So can I ask for the record that we endorse them? Thank you. Agree. And then we go to item 5. Have your say. I've got a list of speakers. I shall ask if any others haven't declared want to do so. And the Democratic Service Officers will catch your name as well as your eye. Okay. The first I have here is John Acker. Please come forward, John. It's good to see you.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here tonight, and may I start by offering my personal congratulations on your various appointments. I would very much appreciate if I could speak tonight on a subject that has been very much of local concern. I do come and speak on behalf of West Merseyside Council, where I'm a local councillor. There's been a really important document which has been released by the government relating to British Energy Statement, which was released in April. And it sets out really key ambitions by the government to develop rapidly as it can nuclear energy. There's development side of sea, and despite its waning interest in Chinese involvement, the development of new nuclear on the Bradwell site. And with it, most striking these small modular reactors. It is that really that I want to address, and the implications for the borough. The borough issued a very full statement as part of the Part 1 consultation. And what I seek from the council on behalf of my own council is that it puts out a new statement, putting out what it put out in the Part 1 consultation. I'm looking at Councillor Corrie, and I remember 3 years ago when he addressed what was a national meeting in Colchester, and it's a really important one, as leader, that was supported cross-party, opposing the development of Bradwell. And the reasons for Colchester policy in Part 1 were very clear: need for heightened public and local authority engagement, concern about environmental considerations, ecology, flood risk, climate change. And I make no excuses in repeating what I said then about what the prospect was in terms of Bradwell and the profound impact on Mersey. But importantly tonight, I want Colchester, if possible, to engage in the planning process. You did effectively object to the Part 1, but I urge you to express very clearly, as a council, your objection to what is in the paper. And don't be fooled by the small SMRs. They're not small, they're very big. They have profound impact not only on Mersey, but the whole estuary as far as we're concerned. So I make the proposal tonight that you earnestly consider making a fresh statement and make it as part of the planning process which will be undertaken. That is very in simple terms what I want to put to you. Thank you. And I should indicate that we will be writing to the Chief Executive, putting this in writing. Thank you very, very much for your consideration.
Thank you. And I'll reply for us.
Thank you.
First of all, again, thank you, and thank you for bringing this subject to us as you have done before. I too remember those conversations. I know Councillor Corrie has a passion, others do too. We haven't, however, as a due administration, sat and reviewed this. So you'll bear with me if I say that we will need that pause at the right time. And the right time is when we have a fresh consultation and we have something that we must look at. What I can tell you today is that officers tell me that they have been engaged with Malden. You know our relative roles are different. We have a duty to cooperate. As a consultee in a neighbouring authority, we would have to look at proposals when they come. Neither Malden nor us, nor any that we've spoken to, it knows when that will come to us. We're always aware, as you are, of the public debate, the public politics about this, and the positioning of companies who seek to build small nuclear reactors, any multiple of which could fit easily into Bradwell, we would agree. So what we can say today, I think, is just the point about principle. My expectation, subject to that conversation and that process, is this council's position would remain as stated, that we object to new nuclear at Bradwell due to the many and unacceptable local environmental impacts that you've rehearsed and been through before. We prefer a focus on renewable energy. You've asked us about, and those who have both knowledge and are opponents of this, we would work with them and others, with advisors and interest groups, as we should, to make the most emphatic case we can in opposition to new nuclear on that side. But we have to wait for the process. And at the moment, there is none for us yet to engage. But I hope that reaffirmation of public position will give you due assurance, and we'll await your letter in due time.
Thank you very much for that full reply. I very much appreciate it on behalf of the Town Council in West Mersey. That's a very full statement which is made on the public record. Thank you very much.
In terms of time and handling, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I wish the administration all the best, in the same way as I wish the previous administration all the best. And I wish all 51 councillors all the best. And my big regret is that the way the council operates, that 53 of them are excluded from the major decision-making process. It's a point I make whenever I have the opportunity, and tonight there's another opportunity. But the reason I've would like to speak is to seek some clarifications from yourself and Councillor Fox. I would have asked Councillor Nissen, but I don't think she's here. But Chairman, the Gazette, May the 18th, headline, New Traffic Light Coalition in Control, which is a change from the Progressive Alliance. You were quoted as saying the coalition helped restore Colchester's trust in politics. And I wonder if you could explain what it's meant, because restore, dictionary definition is to return it to what it was, make it good as it was. So at what point in time are we going back to restore it? Was it 12 months ago, 5 years ago? So if you explain what is meant by restoring trust in politics in Colchester. And I assume that the Labour group and the Green group are also signed up, because it's a collective responsibility. And Councillor Fox, you single out the word the environment as what's going to attract your attention. And of course, the biggest item of the environment in your ward is Middlewick. So what are you going to do? Because on the only opportunity you've had to vote, notwithstanding what you've told the public in press comments and on the doorstep, is that the only opportunity you ever had on this subject, you voted for development on Middlewick, as indeed did the councillors for Beerchurch and Old Heath wards, as indeed did every Labour councillor and every Liberal Democrat bar one. So we have an administration which says it wants to restore trust in local politics, but with an administration whose members want to build on Middlewick, because that's what the vote says. The extraordinary meeting the Borough Council held on the 1st of February last year, and as every vote was recorded by Zoom, every individual councillor is named, every Liberal Democrat councillor bar one, every Labour councillor voted for Middlewick, 1,000 houses. Now we can blame the government, of course we can blame the government, and to be quite honest, the lack of determination at parliamentary level to prevent Middlewick being lost. But this council agreed to put 1,000 houses on Middlewick when it didn't have to. And I want to know what Councillor Fox is going to do about it, because he's on record as being opposed to it, but the voting record has him voting for it, as indeed did every councillor in Old Heath and Beerchurch ward.
Timing is immaculate, Bob, to the second as ever. I'd ask Councillor Fox to pick up on your remarks to the extent that he wants to. You will know that the local plan committee meets soon, so this will get a good airing in that place, and that may be the better place for it. But I will address your points about what might be meant about restoring trust in politics. Now, I am really consistent and careful about this. I point no finger at anybody. I take the view that councillors who make that effort, many are in this room, should start with my trust and my confidence in them, and I hope to have a measure of the same back. So this was a general remark about what should not be an issue of deniability. We know that politics in this country is corroded by lack of personal and public integrity. The gap between promise and performance can affect us all, but it's also our personal behaviours, how we are with each other and how we are with members of the public. So that was what drove that remark. How we will restore that trust to extent locally, I think we do it the way I've just said, by how we act, by doing what we will say we're going to do, which is what this council meeting is, this cabinet meeting is a start of, being approachable, transparent and honest, and by demonstrating personal integrity. This is not a critique, as I say, of colleagues, but I think Colchester councillors in the round, this cabinet and this administration, if we hit those tests of good behaviour, will make an impact on the views of the public of politics and politicians.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you to Bob for coming and speaking to Cabinet this evening. And I think that your comments rightly display the feeling that there is out there about Middlewick, but also about a number of other sites in the borough that have been included in the local plan. Let's go back to the start of all of this, though. The planning system is in the hands of landowners and developers. It's not in the hands of local councils, unfortunately. And the onus is on us as a local council to put together a local development plan that meets the targets that have been handed down to us from government and to respond to landowners that come forward with land. It's very clear to me there are lots of people in my own ward that do not want Middlewick developed, and having voted at the local plan committee was not an indication that I wanted that land developed, but it was an indication that we need to have a local plan. And part of trust in politics and trust in local politics and integrity also about explaining to people how the process works with these things and not offering things that cannot be achieved. And I, alongside my local ward councillors, have run a campaign over the last, however many years it's been, 6 years I've been a councillor, and I think it's probably been as long as that, to ask the Ministry of Defence to take it off the table. And I have been to Westminster, visited the Ministry of Defence with my local ward councillors. We have petitioned the Prime Minister. We have continued to put up the fight where others have been found wanting in terms of that particular piece of land. But there is a process in place, and the government inspector has now found that Middlewick can be developed for 1,000 houses. So it will be up to every single one of the 51 councillors, as you rightly say, and every single one of the 51 councillors will have their opportunity to vote when we move to a vote on the local plan in the coming months, assuming that it's recommended to full council from the local plan committee. What I have always said is that we have to protect the local environment there at Middlewick, and I think there are definitely opportunities to ensure that that is protected either as a country park or nature reserve, and that is what I will continue to do and continue to lobby the Ministry of Defence not to develop that land. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Bob. Do you want to come back?
The record states that councillors who voted for the local plan voted for Middlewick being included in the local plan. They did not have to do so. They did not have to do so. That's the whole issue. And we have councillors saying they are opposed to development of Middlewick, but the record of a Zoom named vote is that they voted for Middlewick to be developed. They have an opportunity, one last opportunity, to reject Middlewick in the local plan. And I'm sure many people will be watching. Many people will be watching. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Bob. I'm sure they will. Thanks. Right. I've got 3 councillors. It should be in no particular order, but it's the order given to me. So Councillor Dave Harris, first of all. If you use your mic.
Thank you very much.
Dave.
Good evening, Leader, Deputy Leader and Cabinet. Lovely to be here to talk to you. I wasn't going to speak on Middlewick, but I will just agree with Councillor Fox's remarks just now. There is a process, and we all know who is selling the land, and it's certainly not us selling that land. I would prefer it to be a nature reserve with all my heart and all my being. And that's what I shall join with you, Councillor Fox, in campaigning for to the very bitter end, and I will do that. Anyway, the thing I've really come here for, not that, was to talk on two other items, one of which is praise, and the other one of which is praise. Elfrida House. I had a friend go into Elfrida House at a very aged time. It was a building of the 60s, as you know, Leader. Very primitive, shared bathrooms, in a condition you would expect from the 60s that we certainly, as today, looking after aged people, wouldn't tolerate. And I want to praise the previous but one administration, because I think it was 3 years ago this was started off, Councillor Fox's watch as housing portfolio to start that off. A very brave decision. I've been up there this week, last week, the week before, and looking at that road there, looking at the cranes and the building going up. I understand it's going to be built next year, and I wanted to actually praise and encourage the Cabinet to continue to ensure that residents that were in Elfrida House got the chance to go back, those that want to, because it's going to be a much, much better place for those residents, something that I want my mum to go to, that I wouldn't have wanted my mum to go to before. So thank you for that. And the second bit of praise is about the council zone team. The council zone team has been working with the Monkwick Residents Association in the last few days. In the last week and a half, we had a fun day, a Queen's Jubilee fun day, and they were exemplary. I want more of the same of that. Community with a big C. If you can get resources into the waste and service team doing the zone team, you get lots of thanks from our Residents Association. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Dave. I mean, it is so good to have generous remarks about the unseen work often of officers. It's by the nature of things that we talk about the areas of combat and difference. So it's great to hear what you've just said on both of those counts. And I'll go to Councillor Goss, who might want to talk about his attitudes and approach on these matters.
Thank you for your comments. Obviously, the head service is in the room, so he can pass those on to staff, and it's always good to hear the positives, because sometimes we do have a tendency to focus on the areas that need to be improved. Fair to say I have quite a robust style, very hands-on, as you know, and certainly there's some areas that I'm focusing on as part of the administration to look at deliver services and resourcing, and certainly I'll take on board your comments. I don't disagree. I'd certainly love another 10 or 20 members of staff in there. I'm sure, like anybody in the council, would like 10 or 20 extra members of staff in any service, but obviously we do have a budget figure that we do have to stick to, but we will look for efficiencies and improvements through technology, process improvement, and to try and get more people onto the front line, of course. But thank you for the feedback, it is appreciated.
Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Dave. Before you go, Elfrida House, the points noted about access return, perhaps Councillor Fox might want to say something on that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harris, for coming and speaking about that. I think Elfrida House is a really great scheme, and I mean, it's good to see the building work having now begun as well. It will be 36 new 1 and 2 bedroom flats, 4 more than there were previously there. And I remember when Councillor Corey and I went and spoke to the residents way back when we started this process, and they were really keen to see improvements there as well. I think the other thing that's great about that particular scheme, which should be completed by this time next year, is that it's providing work for local contractors, good quality jobs for local workers as well, and so it's contributing to the local economy as well. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leader.
Councillor Lee Scaldis. Welcome, Lee.
Thank you. It's a bit like going back in time, seeing all these familiar faces here. I wasn't going to speak on it, but my question's short, so I just want to address what Sir Bob has said, because much of what he said is misleading and pretty much all entirely false. It is not, Bob. The only people who have voted on the local plan regarding Middlewick are the local plan members in 2017 who voted for Section 2. The vote you refer to was an amendment to the budget, which was written on the back of a fag packet by Councillor Barber, and it was for a feasibility study for a country park on Middlewick, which, as we know, do not own Middlewick, we cannot just build a country park on Middlewick. So that was very much a populist element. I'm surprised you're supporting the Conservatives, but hey, you did it for 5 years in government. So my question actually is, Chair, around this time last year, I spoke to the previous administration with an idea to deal with graffiti. And one of those ideas was to look at promoting local artists to paint over some of the worst areas. Not everyone will like the art. That's the whole idea of art. Some people love it, some dislike it, but it's much better than the graffiti we see. Cabinet member before did get in touch with me and they said it's a great idea. I replied and I never heard back, and obviously haven't seen anything since. So I'm wondering if it's a policy that this current council can look to move forward very briskly with.
Thank you very much. I'll go to Councillor Goss.
You actually hit on a really cracking point. So I went to York for a short break very, very recently. And I drive the wife nuts with, picking up litter and stuff. So when I'm away, I don't tend to do it so much in other people's towns. What I did do was stop to speak to somebody who was spraying a BT box, which we know get covered in graffiti. Now, in my ward, if I see it, I just take a graffiti and get rid of it because I'm hands-on a bit like Dave Harris is. But I don't expect councillors to do that. At this moment in time, and I don't think councillors have realised what we've done. In the latest graffiti policy that we adopted, actually what we've now said is we will not clean off graffiti from third-party equipment. So it's not happening. So what we are looking to do is potentially recharge those costs back to companies like BT and UK Power Networks, etc. But that was acutely in that policy, and lots of people didn't realise what that meant. But I've picked up on that. So that is something I'm working on. But back to York, what they'd signed off in the town centre, working with the bid in York, was to fund some art to actually cover those BT boxes and street furniture with really decent designs that have been, I think, done through a competition. That was funded by the bid, not by the council taxpayer, and literally they were spraying it on safely. And obviously I stopped to speak to the artist and she gave me her card. Don't think she'll be coming to Colchester to do it, but it was really good to get that input. So I did actually speak to officers about this in a meeting only last week, which I can see Rory is nodding in agreement. It is something potentially we could speak to the bid about, because you could look at the town centre as a place to start and see if it's successful, and then send it out to other neighbourhoods. So absolutely the idea is there. Of course, it's always down to funding, because obviously you've got to pay for spray paint and probably some artist time, etc. But certainly something we will pick up, and actually something I've already mentioned to Rory, so you'll probably be quite pleased about that.
I mean, my only comment on the costs would be we need to look at the money we would save from not sending staff back to the same spots doing it. And there will be some artists that do it for just the cost of paint, which can be bought. Well, I know artists who've done it for me and they get deals from it, so we could get it relatively cheap at a good price.
I don't disagree. The one challenge I have with this is that in Mile End we did an art project. You've done similar in your ward as well. We got professional artists into doing amazing piece of artistry on an underpass in the hope that it wouldn't get vandalised. And then of course people that are not artistic, they're just idiots with a spray can, graffitied over it and ruined it. So that's the only challenge we have, that if you try and remove spray on top of spray paint, you will actually start taking it off with the graffiti. That's the challenge. So although that's why I want to see how it's worked in York, because it would have been in for a few months. I want to see if it stopped it, or whether idiots with spray cans just going over really decent art. So there is a challenge around it, but in principle I agree with you.
Thank you very much indeed. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, Cabinet. Good evening. So I'm here on the topic of fly tipping, which is quite an issue in Newtown. And dealing with fly tipping and cleaning it up is quite a drain on the council. I'm here to ask for sort of a proactive solution to be deployed to lower the rate of fly tipping. which will relieve neighbourhood teams to focus on other tasks. Looking at other wards in Colchester, like Greensted and Beerchurch, with a high rate of fly tipping, there's been solutions put in, bulk pickups, free bulk pickups, which have been quite successful in lowering the rate of fly tipping. And I was wondering if such a thing could be rolled out in the new town. Thank you.
Very much. I go to Councillor Goss.
There are no plans to extend that across Colchester, and it contradicts actually something you said in your opening statement. You were saying you wanted it to take pressure off the zone team, but obviously if we deploy that kind of service into Beerchurch, into Newtown, into Shrub End, into other areas where there may be a link between deprivation and fly tipping, which there is in some respects, actually you need more staff travelling around to pick up things in bulk, 3 times a week. So I think what happens in Greensted, I'm aware of it, but it is the only place. It would have to be looked at carefully, because in theory, if you've then got teams running around picking up fly tipping, it could actually have the converse reaction, because potentially people will say, well, I'm not going to bother driving to Shrub End anymore. I'll just leave it on the side of the street, and somebody will come along in a van. I'll dump my bed or my mattress or my old sofa. And therefore, if the council drives around other wards 3 times a week and it becomes known, it will just simply increase fly tipping. So I think you have to be really careful on how you implement strategies, and it would have to be very carefully looked at. I will take it away. We will give it some thought. I'll discuss it with the head of service, but I would need a lot more data before you can just make arbitrary decisions like that, because it does come with a cost. More vehicles on the road, more pollution, etc. And of course, if it's on private land, we won't touch it, because that's down to the landowner, the management company, the bin store owner, which again is where a lot of fly tipping happens actually. And the council shouldn't be spending taxpayers' money on that. That is down to the management companies. And again, we're doing some proactive work on that, which could bring revenue into the council as well and make it easier. So I'll take on board the points you've made, but I certainly wasn't rushing in to send vans all around Colchester picking up fly tipping, but we will look at it and I will base it on data. I'm very facts driven and data driven and cost driven. And you can rest assured that I will be speaking about this at my next portfolio holder update in a couple of weeks. But thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox.
So I just wanted to come in also as a councillor for the same ward. I think what Councillor McLean was asking, just to clarify, was not regular collection of fly tipping, but regular scheduled collection of bulk free collection of people who don't have cars, for example, who can't easily get down to the tip, perhaps with white goods or sofas or beds. And there's a high turnover of private rental, so lots of there are large items that people find it difficult to dispose of. That's what we're talking about. It's bulk collection. It's not necessarily. I think I'm correct in that, Councillor McLean, right? That's what we're after.
Yes, that's true, and it's mainly due to the high turnover in houses, which is very much similar to what is the case in Greensted.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the case in a number of wards actually. It's not just unique to Newtown. It happens in quite a number of wards that I'm aware of, but we'll look at it. But at the end of the day, the more you offer people, the more challenges it can also cause in communities. So, we'll look at it very, very carefully.
Thank you very much for that question, and for other councillors on the same kind of bread and butter issues, which really matter to all of our residents. And for other councillors listening, I saw a couple of you nodding. These are the things that people raise with us. I'm sure that Councillor Goss, when he's had that full review and has got a way ahead, will make sure that that gets shared with all councillors, so that any adjustments to the service are understood, and the key facets of it as it is now are also understood. So thank you all.
Thank you.
That, I think, is our scheduled Have Your Say. So.
We'll be taking your contribution under the when it comes up under item 7.2.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much. Just so we're all clear for those listening, we do have your say on a particular item. So if anybody wants to speak on a particular item and have declared, we'll do that then. I know some councillors will be. So we'll move on in the agenda. On to what is a very significant item for us all, which is under our strategy, cabinet vision and priorities for. Thank you very much, Mark. Decisions reviewed by the scrutiny panel.
And on the chairman.
Thank you both. Right, we now will go on to the agenda item. Item 7, which is, as described, under strategy, the key item for us around our way ahead in terms of vision and priorities for 22 and 23. We have one councillor, I think, due to speak. I take that at the beginning. Councillor Pearson and then Councillor, I'll pick up on, I have Nick Chilvers. If I take Nick first, sorry, if that's all right, Chris. I'll take it in the order given. Nick Chilvers.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, good luck to the new administration. You'll need it because money from central government is bound to dry up soon. They can't keep spending like they've been, and the public are under the cosh too. So please don't even think about raising council tax. But it's right that you've extended the number in cabinet. If a portfolio is too large, the holder doesn't have grip on detail, in my opinion. So, but target your spending for the really needy and the problems that affect ordinary people in their everyday lives. Concentrate on essential services, enforcement, simple stuff like parks, open spaces, so important, that lift the spirits. Culture and sport have had a good run. It's about time perhaps they stood on their own feet. Any new projects must work for the majority, not narrow interest groups, in my opinion. As regards to levelling up the southeast, all the right words in the report, but what will you actually do and what can you do, given that you've allowed building on every bit of spare land between Mersey Road and Hythe, and you don't hold all the levers of power? Can I suggest the deputy leader takes the rest of the cabinet and senior officers on a minibus tour around the southeast to look at the state of some of the area and the lack of services and opportunities. Newtown, Hythe, Spital. Just walk down Mersey Road, at the bottom of Mersey Road, absolute mess. When it last got touched with a broom, goodness knows. The southeast isn't close to the strategic routes, jobs and main services, and the bus services have both been reduced. And you and highways wonder why people use their cars. Meanwhile, Grinstead gets the pot of money, the north and west get the roads, the jobs, the services and retail. Well, you've been told by the inspector that a master plan is needed for Middlewick and to engage with the community. And he did say residents. I hope that doesn't go ahead, but if it does, a wider look with the southeast would tie in nicely. I can tell you now, relying on online questionnaires for Middlewick won't be acceptable, nor will sorting things out behind closed doors just with a few councillors. You'll have to be more creative in engagement and consultation than that. We don't have the benefit of a community council like Mile End or Stanway to bat for us. So it needs approachable, dedicated officers to steer it and ones that can stand up to highways. If you do it right, you can expect residents to engage constructively and we'll get the best out of an unwanted scheme. We need someone looking at the strategic picture of the south east, out from St Bottles Corner right out to end of Beer Church. Otherwise, the new housing will bring more congestion, pollution and social problems. And it will be your fault.
Thank you very much. I hope I'm speaking clearly enough so you can hear me at least at the front. That's great. It's quite a long list, but the sentiments of it, I absolutely know that my colleagues and I share and accept. We know that what we have to do in engagement and consultation on any issues affecting residents have to be done as well as we can. I know that that's a challenge because people's attention is fragmented, isn't it? But I do know that we use, and so do the council on highways matter, a whole variety of different fora to try and make those connections. But it's a great point and we accept it. In terms of the challenge that we have, in terms of need and getting it to those to whom it is most necessary, we get that too. And that's really the heart of the paper that you've chosen to speak against. And one last thing, and I know that Councillor Goss and Councillor Fox might want to add a few words on this. We completely get the day-to-day, the basics of life really matter. You know, keeping your town as clean as you can, keeping your parks as accessible and as beautiful, frankly, as is possible. Those things add to the quality of life of the everyday, and we're absolutely up for doing all of that. You can mark our work during the course of the year, and I look forward to you doing that. Colleagues, anything else to add?
Mr. Chilvers, Nick, thank you very much for coming. It's good to see you back at a council meeting holding after to the fire. I think I recognise a lot of what you've said. It's things that appear on the doorstep when I'm out talking to residents in our ward, and I know it's the sort of thing that people actually say across the borough. And I think it does speak to some of our priorities. You know, we do want to be on the side of local residents. That is about essential services, as the leader has just said, keeping people's streets clean and tidy, the parks looking good, protecting our open spaces, as both you and Sir Bob have talked about this evening. I would be more than happy to lead a delegation from Cabinet to walk around our ward and to see some of the issues. Using the Hive task force to sort out some of the issues at the Hive is really key. But I think also some of what you said will hopefully be resolved in some of the other projects that there are, some of the strategic stuff, levelling up fund bid, you know, sorting out St Bottles roundabout, I think will hopefully really benefit our local residents in their trips into town and across that part of town as well. But I look forward to continuing to hear your thoughts about how we're doing, and I know you weren't afraid of telling us where we've done well, hopefully, but also where we might have things to improve too.
If I can just have that other minute. Well, yes, it's 6 out of 10 at the moment. I'll just add, it's all very well being idealistic, and I know some councillors are very idealistic, but you need to put yourself in the position of new residents moving into the borough. Busy lives, both working all hours to pay the rent and the mortgage, 2 kids at school of school age. No well-paid jobs in the town centre, and then be expected to leave their car at home with no decent alternatives. Put that to them, you'll get short shrift. It will be a 2-word answer. If the authorities don't understand that, they really need a reality check. I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Nick. 6 out of 10, 2 weeks in, I'll take that for the moment. Thank you. Councillor Pearson, please. Welcome also.
Evening all, it's good to see you. I just wanted to quickly say something to Sir Bob Russell. I've now been a councillor for 8 years and I've never felt disenfranchised under the cabinet system. Having been leader in a committee system of another authority, I have to say that I think this is a much more agile and responsive system than the committee system ever was. The thing that I came to talk to you about tonight is your vision and priorities, which is really excellent to see. Compared to the last administration, where I don't think it did get a vision or priorities. So it's really good to see that. And I just wanted to comment on a couple of them. One is in paragraph 4.5, where we talk about encouraging recycling, etc., minimising waste. And I would just like to ask the portfolio holder whether, knowing as we do that the wheelie bins actually improve that, there is an intention, at least to begin within this year, to roll those out to the rest of the Colchester community where they are appropriate, where it's appropriate to do so. 4.6 talks about creative and effective new ways to bring forward affordable housing. Now, I think that's a very laudable sentiment. However, I just want to draw Cabinet's attention to the definition of affordable housing versus social housing, because I think that this paragraph is missing one key element, and that's about social housing. Affordable housing, as defined by central government, is housing that is rented at 80% of market rent. It includes lots of private housing, and we know that since Thatcherism, the amount of social housing across the country has reduced markedly. Won't bore you with statistic figures, but you know, I know, that across the borough of Colchester and across the country, it has reduced significantly. In the current economic climate, we need more social housing, not 80% market rented housing. We need housing that where somebody knows they're going to have a more or less permanent tenancy, not a property where they might get 18 months if they're lucky. So I would just ask Cabinet to consider amending that paragraph slightly to include increasing social housing. I know that the last coalition administration was really good at finally starting to build social housing in the town. And I think that my colleague Labour councillors would love to see that happening again. Thank you.
If I can comment on that point, Chris, thank you for explaining the difference between social and affordable. The idea of putting what we did in the report was there are new ideas that will have that permanency that tenants are looking for and that reduced rent, but they won't be open to right to buy. And it's a completely new scheme, and I'm not going to go into the details because I don't know them particularly well. My predecessor worked on them with officers, but it's something that's totally new, and it will be additional to social housing and additional to affordable housing, and the 30% quote is for those. So it's a new initiative.
Regarding wheelie bins, you know, I'm a big fan of them. I'm about the only part of Mile End that doesn't actually have a wheelie bin. Can you believe it? Apart from the one I've got in my garage where I store my recycling I bought off Amazon. So yes, if it was up to me, I would roll wheelie bins out tomorrow. I've always said that publicly. It's not a secret. You know, I'm very straight. I play a straight bat. There are no plans in the strategy at this moment in time to do that. All I can say is that bigger things are going on in government where what councils do in terms of servicing recycling and picking up from the curbside, because as you know, in the UK, it's an absolute mess. Because if you take Manchester, for instance, several councils in Manchester, you could move from one part of Manchester to another, and actually what you can recycle on the doorstep is completely different. And it's completely different how you actually would recycle it. Because some councils have wheelie bins, recycling, etc., etc. I could write a thesis on it, probably won't, it can be quite boring, but the situation at the moment is the government is trying to level up what councils collect. so that, you know, if they mandate Tetra Packs, for instance, it's in the original papers, I think it's been moved out, every council would have to find a way to collect Tetra Packs from the doorstep. Not all councils collect glass. I mean, tendering service is woeful. You have to take it to a bottle bank, so of course it goes in the ground, no doubt. So we'll look at the longer term strategy as part of that piece of work. I think the only thing the government is not going to mandate is actually the collection system. So they'll say you have to collect food, you have to collect garden waste, you have to, you know, do whatever with Tetra Packs. But they're not going to tell us how to collect it. That's for the local council to work out. So there are no plans at the moment, but with the Evolving Environment Act and the review that's going on at government and bigger stuff at Essex, obviously that will mature over time, and we will obviously follow that appropriately.
Thank you for the remarks and the explanation. I think there's really good challenges to us. And the only two things I would add are this. One is that this is a placeholder. It's really clear about intent, but this early on, you know how the system works. Within a week of us being here, this was ready to go through the process. Here it is. Absolutely happy to take challenge, absolutely happy to take ideas for better. We will roll out those next steps. Thank you. We're listening to these points and to others. Oh, and I'll stop on that. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you. I would just say thank you to all three of you for your responses, and I look forward to seeing the slight tweaks to the vision and priorities. And I hope that in 12 months' time, or a little bit less than that, when Mr. Chilvers comes back, he will rate us a good 9 out of 10, because none of us can be perfect. So 9 out of 10 would be good enough. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Chris. Councillor Summings.
Good evening. I'd like to talk about the vision paper too and suggest how it might be improved. But first of all, I'd like to congratulate the coalition parties on their election results and the office holders on their positions. That's great. I support the aspirations of the visions paper at item 7 on tonight's agenda. We all want to address the cost of living crisis, climate change and inequalities. But like Mr. Chilvers, there's a limit to how much idealism we should put in these papers, and there's only so much a local council can do in any of these items. To focus more on practical matters too, real things that can be done with real people, not just political statements. The base problem for Colchester, in my view, having lived in the outside looking in for 30 years, is that its house building is run far ahead of its infrastructure. It's no good us blaming other public bodies. Colchester Borough Council is responsible for handing out the permissions and collecting the money from planning gain. And it has the convening power to tap into other funding sources. Now we have city status, we have everything we need for uses. Our top priority should be a coherent plan to address these problems. Previous administration made a start on something that mustn't be allowed to fall by the wayside, a proper inventory of the infrastructure deficit. Something similar to the Essex-wide GIF report prepared in 2017. This will enable the council to justify proper developer contributions and provide the base layer for better grant applications. I urge the coalition to take this idea forward as part of a plan to get better at capturing land value uplift, a progressive concept that the coalition should be embracing with even more enthusiasm than a conservative like me. It will be a cornerstone of Colchester's transition into a city we can be proud of, one with more GPs and hospital beds per head of population, a good road and public transport network, more schools and jobs, better public services, better facilities in South East Colchester, again, as mentioned by Mr. Chilvers, which I see linking, I see the infrastructure in South East Colchester as holding back Middlewick, the lack of it, and believe that we should be using that to fight Middlewick rather than throwing out the whole local plan on it. And yes, in addition to all those things, we should have more surplus available to support the heady aspirations expressed in the paper. Councillors need to get together and dig deep to ensure that we're not fobbed off with half measures on these things. We should get smarter at raising money to allow our aspirations to be met. I'm happy to help any way I can from the lowly opposition benches.
Nothing lowly about the opposition benches. We've just been there for a year. And who knows when we might return, how swift and for how long. Thank you. I really value, and it's back to the earlier remarks, proposition, ideas and challenge. That's absolutely how we should work. I know a couple of my colleagues would like to talk. I'll go to Mark and if I may to Andrea afterwards. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Sykes. I welcome those comments. I welcome your knowledge as well. I know during the local plan process, you were very informative in opposition to some bits and pieces, and a lot of what you said was really knowledgeable and helpful. And actually, I think the problems are the local plan system is not good enough, and we couldn't take on all of those. But actually, what you've said touches a bit on my portfolio, definitely on Andrea's, and probably on many others. I think it's that piece of work about the audit is really important. So I think we should continue that on, looking at the asset, looking at the big deficits. I, under previous leadership, have talked about the growing pains that Colchester has. I think that's one way to talk about it. We have followed the government targets of development, and it has meant that we do have growing pains. I think other market towns, as people may have seen Colchester's market town, have seen similar growth problems. And I think it's a massive problem nationally. Successive governments have not delivered on. And actually, during the COVID period, 2019 to 2020, the 7 largest developers made an average of 1 billion profit each, £7 billion of profit. They should be taking a much bigger stake in how we build our developments out to make them more responsible, to reduce environmental impacts, to reduce crime, etc. We have a role, but you are knowledgeable. You know our role is small and our levers are very small in how we can adapt to development. We have to take numbers. We have to look at planning. We know it's pretty presumptuous the way the planning system is. It's in favour of development. So we need more support. So I'm glad you're on board. We can work together to try and help defend against too much house building without infrastructure. I absolutely agree with your point about the audit of resources and looking at infrastructure. I definitely think we should do that. But I do think we need the support of government. You talked about better NHS services. There are massive issues over successive years in government that have failed to deliver on. So we will keep lobbying on those fronts and try and action what you've talked about this evening. I welcome your input on that. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for bringing this up. I think we've probably had more in common than we've had out of common over the years. And I completely agree with you that I think house building has overtaken infrastructure. I think from the Essex report that you mentioned, there's something like 335 billion behind. Obviously, that's not just Colchester, but we're taking a big cut in that. I have spoken to Councillor Ellis, who started this initiative, and very much the headlines at the moment, but it's got thank you. It's got 2 strands really. One is to identify where the gaps are and then look at how we can try and get developers to contribute and join things up, because normally 106 money is spent, very locally, and then you'll get an island and it doesn't connect to the next bit. And we've got this happening in a very small scale in Wivenhoe, as we speak, that we've got, someone that's putting money towards a cycle path that goes to the middle of the field, because the next developer's got to come along and join that one up with another one, which is just ridiculous. And that's the first sort of stage of that project. But then I think there's also another argument that goes to government and says, this is our constraints. If we haven't got a water supply, if we haven't got a waste system that works, if a hospital has got this many people and it's waiting list for these people, then we can't take any more houses. And I think it has twofold meaning. The first is to fix the gaps that we've already got, and the second one is to say we're not taking these numbers again. I mean, certainly with the planning system that was put forward for consultation, that would have been quite helpful. Now we don't know what's happening with the planning system. But we'll have that preparation or that work done in ahead of the next set of numbers that we're expected to take. So yes, I will be using all of your knowledge. Certainly you're the most knowledgeable person I know of how to get developers to offer up a bit more money, because that's what you do. And you certainly understand this way better than I do, but 3 days, I haven't had any more than the lines of what we're actually doing at the moment. But as far as I know, it's a project that's going forward and it won't be lost.
Thank you both. If I can just round, please do come back, and then
If I can just come back on it, we must take responsibility for this ourselves and not diffuse it over other parts of government. I notice this all the time. We blame the government for the planning system, but we really have to grip this ourselves, and we have the powers if we can find the right tweaks. With the help of officers, we probably can. We should be I've seen so many mistakes on the Section 106 collecting. We haven't done a cell. This inventory will absolutely give us the intellectual foundation for being able to collect this money with conviction, and not giving up when a developer says, oh, it's not quite collected, it's not quite connected to the development. So I really do look forward to working with you, Andrea and Mark. I think I can, we can come up with some ideas together.
thank you. And before you go, thank you for bringing that freshness and that offer, which our officers and our portfolio holders, I am sure, will want to walk through. We've said that. There's 3 things I'd like to say to you, if I may, before we go. The first is that the paper, as I said earlier, intention with as much detail as we could put together in the time. We'll do this later on, but we will be rolling out what each part of the vision will mean to give it substance. You'd expect us to do this. And that's what I'm saying we will do, is we turn from intent and half a promise to a plan, then the plan will be shared. And it will be comprehensive. We've spoken quite a bit about house building infrastructure. And actually, I'm comfortable with that, because that's about quality of life. And a lot of what we're talking about is real essential need and quality of life. So I look forward to those conversations that lie ahead. The second thing I want to say is continuity. It's really important that this administration signals now, and in effect, Andrea has done this, by saying that we're not going to sort of look to tear up anything that was started under the last administration. With very rare exceptions, if this will be take the best of what we have and build on it. That's the way the council works, that's the process, that's good governance, and we will do that. And the third is to address your remark about limits. Really, you touched on this in 2 ways. 1, we should do what we can, blame other people, and 2, that there's limits to what we can do. Actually, both kind of have to coexist with each other. There are natural limitations to what we're able to do, but we should take responsibility for what we could do and stand up for it and make a difference. And I'll round it off with just this. We've just gone through a pandemic. This local authority did very well, is the view of others, about its role and what it could do to draw people together, partners together, to make a really substantial difference. So government money was flowing through the system, but the hundreds of people, the many hundreds of people who were volunteering and delivering goods, service, support and kindness, they were yoked together, helped to come together by this local authority. So I don't underestimate the challenge, but I think we genuinely can think that we can have a real influence upon the lives of people, which is what we try to address here, if we work in a systematic way with other people. Thank you for giving me something to say to you. I think that's it for, I have to say, Richard, on that item. Right, Cabinet, let's talk to the item ourselves for a few minutes. I think that was a really useful conversation that's helped us rehearse some of the points that matter most to us. And then we'll move to a conclusion about just that. I think it's really important from my perspective that we just remind ourselves, and we've talked to this, about what actually we put, for those of you, please pay attention, chaps, that this is about our vision and our headline priorities, right? Starting with the cost of living crisis. We do flag other priorities in here, from the town centre to our heritage and cultural offer, plus initiatives which relate to the quality of life for our residents. We've committed to make visible differences working with residents and working with others. Our intention given the needs which are real, manifest and growing, from inflation to the cost of essentials, which is a higher burden for those most in need, and falling living standards, is to address, as just described to Councillor Sonics, with our partners to address systematically those challenges and play our part ahead of the winter that's coming towards us. So we are going to, as described here, develop a cost of living action plan about how the council will work alongside new and existing partners to help ease the pressure on residents. We will contribute financially. We will reinforce our teams to gear up a coordinated response to the cost of living crisis. We will ensure government funding and other funding is combined with local funds and support to deliver help to those most in need. We will provide additional financial advice and support through our financial and employment support services. These are lots of words. What it means is giving people knowledge, help, a signpost to those who can help them, whether it's from jobs and employment to debt relief and debt crisis management. We will stretch out to those who do not apply for help or know how to access it. We have a particular concern about this. The early scoping with our community partners suggests that we've got a new group of people, those who've not had this challenge before, who won't know how to navigate their way through it. We'll talk about this more in the coming week, but this is a real key responsibility for us. We will also help our food banks if they struggle to respond to need. What we're hearing is both donations are falling and demand is rising. So I expect that we will make an announcement about that in the coming week. I suppose the last point I'd say on this central here is it's language, but it's an attitude. Our attitude has to be that we will stand up for our residents and for as long as we must. And as I say, I really look forward to us collectively being able to make some of this real in the coming week. To Mark, Corey, and then round the table for those who wish to speak to.
Thank you, David. I'll be short, but of course support the vision and objectives that this council is setting out from the start, very early on. We've worked together. This is a traffic light coalition of yellow, red and green, and we are working to solve the biggest crises that we face. And I think there are two crises ahead of us. It is the cost of living crisis, as you've outlined, but we still face a monumental challenge of our life with the environmental impacts of climate change and the ecological impacts. So for me, these objectives absolutely address those. And I wanted to address Councillor Pearson's point as well. I absolutely agree with him. Affordable housing has to be affordable. And I think actually for years it has not been. So social housing is a must. And I think Councillor Luxor was also talking about ways to get around some of the negative policies that have been put in place in housing. And unfortunately, right to buy the aspirations we can accept, but it has taken away so much stock over the last 3 or 4 decades. We need to get back to council housing that is fit, gives people a safe shelter, and is there for in perpetuity. So the interventions for the cost of living crisis we want to do will be right on the front line helping people, but also it's tackling the longer term impacts that we've seen over years where there are cracks in our society, sadly. And I've worked together with the Chief Executive, Pam Donnelly, along with our health partners. We have all worked with third sector partners, with business too. And it's those partnerships made over the last 3 or 4 years that actually set us up for those long-term working. Councillor Goss will know that we've looked at the facts and we've done research into inequalities, and we are really well placed to do that longer term work. So I see in these objectives, we'll do shorter term intervention, but we'll be doing long term work committed to the detail and the facts that come forward and show us who needs help and how we can best help them. And secondly, there are clear objectives on environmental matters, and we will be challenged because of the local plan as well, because of development. But we must mitigate those development challenges. We must go forward and further than we have before because this is not going away. It's for our future, for our young people's future. I was talking to someone earlier about the impacts of pollution in our town, and we monitor them, and we get told about them, but we can't fully tackle them on our own. We have to work with our transport partners, and we will do with the county council to develop much better infrastructure, green infrastructure for getting around the town. I'll stop there, Councillor King, but I absolutely back these objectives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Anything for anybody else on this? Councillor Fox.
Very much, Leader. I will try to be brief because that is what we have set ourselves the task of being. But I believe that these priorities are testament to the working relationships that we're developing as three different political parties coming together in coalition to serve Colchester. We know from the work that we do, speaking with local residents, that the cost of living crisis is real and that people want a council that's on their side. That crisis does require short-term interventions, but also the sort of longer-term support that makes Colchester the sort of place that works for our residents. And that is, as Mark just said, working with local partners in the community, in health and business. And I would also pick up what Councillor Pearson said, you know, housing needs to be genuinely affordable housing. Otherwise, all it does is put pressure on local authorities to top up the support that people need to pay their rent. That isn't sustainable in the longer term. And so we do need the sorts of projects that the council, you know, is delivering. 100 Homes project, Alfreda House, as we said earlier, and also the paper that we'll come to later in the meeting, and a local economy that delivers the Town Deal projects, but also makes levelling up more than just a slogan, but a reality for local people as well, and also a council over the coming years that's transformed, so that we can deliver good quality services locally for people, and that we can respond when crisis like this cost of living crisis hits people in their pockets. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And there's nothing else on this. I'll just conclude by just a positive. You know, we're acting early. That's going to help people who are on the edge of trouble. We're going to provide support to systems that already give help to people who already we know need it. But this is a great town, soon to be city. There's lots of good energy, ambition, vision and opportunity in Colchester. And I think we have to try and keep that balance, that we're going to help where we need, but we're going to help people to also say what they need for themselves. So there's a lot here about prevention and learning, as well as I say, just getting help to people. So we will unveil more of that within a week. And I look forward to taking constructive challenge from everybody in every week that lies ahead. But we will make this real. Stage by stage, and I hope we make a really great start today. Colleagues, if there's nothing else, then I'll put to you to the vote the recommendations set out in paragraph 2.1 and 2.2 of the paper about the way in which we will work, and that we agree that the priorities for the 2022-23 municipal year set out in this report. Thank you all very much. Which case, smoothly, we go on to 7.2. Farewell, Angela. Levelling Up Fund. This paper, just very briefly, is just great news. I'll pick up. Mr. Skinner, thank you. Please come up before I get too lyrical. I'll leave that to later, which might be good all round.
Thank you. Councils can help their citizens achieve fulfilling, productive and healthy lives by promoting a culture of lifelong learning.
But I would say it's much more than training for jobs. It's about the whole person. Adult lives are complicated, pulling us in many different directions. Younger adults may want to make up for lost opportunities at school, or to be better parents, or need a boost to employability, or to completely change direction in their lives. The elderly may be desperate for stimulating new interests. Active minds better cope with life-changing circumstances. But adults are untidy learners. They don't fit into neat categories. Their ideal curriculum is not a ladder to climb, but a climbing frame to explore, moving freely in any direction. Colchester once had precisely that. Greyfriars Adult College was steeped in the community's needs, and it worked with others through the Colchester Learning Shop to make choices clear and accessible to everybody. The borough was a key partner. How befitting of a city it would be to still have those two organisations. But Greyfriars closed and was sold. The Learning Shop partnership fell apart because Greyfriars was the linchpin. Both were town centre, walk-in, off the street facilities. So how do people find out now what's available? Adult learning is far too important to be left to market forces and the survival of the fittest. We formed a charity to fill the gap, but it closed last year after struggling for a decade. But response to our lifelong learning festivals held in 2017 and 18 and subsequent pressure on our website in 2019 proved the need for an honest broker facility giving unbiased information. Enquiries were well beyond our means working from my home office. Recent issues show even greater need for such a valuable service. Learning something new could be an important part of the process to re-energise individuals and of course then communities. This is where the borough can act. A lifelong learning information service could be put together for relatively minimal outlay. The council has connections and resources to do this, and it will be a perfect way to deploy levelling up funds. I'm willing to provide free consultancy. Our charity ran on a shoestring budget and thousands used us. By vigorously promoting adult learning as part of COVID recovery and regeneration, Colchester could enhance its reputation for learning excellence, but for all its citizens, whether 15, 25 or 95. I would urge the Cabinet to consider such a move.
Thank you very much. That's very thoughtful. Thank you for giving us prior notice as well. I'm closer to the upper age limit of the ones you've mentioned, but the point's well taken. Lifelong learning is an essential for our inner health, frankly, and for the connection that we can make to others, as well as the skills it can impart and what they can bring. Now, you'll know, we were talking earlier about who's responsible for what. Well, Essex Council have the primary responsibility for adult skills. You talk about Greyfriars and its loss, and I've heard that from you before, actually, and from some others. Adult learning still continues through the Wilson Marriage Centre, but improving skills and access to education is part of what we're trying to address. So within the Town Deal framework, there is a digital skills hub project. There's work with the ambassadors business groups to look at links between businesses and schools. Now that is perhaps less direct than you're implying, but I can see how that can lead to educational opportunities at certainly some of the age brackets you're talking about. And there is work looking at, against, I think, the prospects outlined here of fresh initiatives, digital or otherwise. But beyond that, I think I'd like to sort of say a thank you for you coming forward and raising the subject. I'll ask officers to get in contact with you again and to have a conversation with you in person to walk through the ideas you've laid out for us. Because there's no question that in the world that we're in, connectivity is a really important thing to opportunities, places of learning included in that. And as a local authority, we do have a role in that. So I thank you. We'll take that away. It's not as bleak as it may seem, but I can absolutely understand, as would my colleagues, that when you've devoted your life, that's how I hear it, to providing educational opportunity to others, the absence of it from your perspective, or the lacking of it, is an important thing. I'll go to Mark Corey.
Thank you. I'll try and be very brief. Thank you. I've heard you speak before and visited when there was I think a celebration almost to thank your charity as it came to an end at Greyfriars. I'm a teacher by trade of younger people, and absolutely see the value of education. And I was very pleased. I don't usually talk too much about party politics, but the Liberal Democrats put forward at the last election a skills wallet to have throughout your life, to be able to go back to learn more. The best minds are those that are inquisitive and want to learn more. So what I wanted to say very briefly is absolutely agree with your ethos. I think it's absolutely spot on. In order to change inequalities, I don't like the terminology of levelling up. I think it's a bit of a gimmick, but if we do it properly, it is about investing in people. It is about seeing everyone's potential. And that does mean that as much as I believe in education at a younger age that I do as a job, it has to be available to people throughout their life. And that's how we will change the prospects of people in Colchester. People are out there on lower wages at the moment that maybe in their 20s, their 30s, their 40s, that could upskill, reskill. Those people, as you said, at home who are a bit less active now because they've ended their careers, could find other challenging opportunities. And again, going back to the links with health and others, that will keep people healthier. And it is something that we will work with partners on. And I just wanted to reiterate my belief in what you said, and I hope we can wrap it into the up bid in some way, shape or form.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Corey. Thank you very much indeed for bringing the subject to us. You can indeed.
Yes, thanks very much for those responses. I do realise Colchester is not an educational authority and hasn't been, but it's ironic and tragic, in fact, that Greyfriars as an adult college started under the Colchester Borough Education Committee, but it ended under another authority. Yes, I understand everything that you've said, but at the crux of it really is for everybody, it's a matter of coherence in the offer and accessibility of that offer. And the information comes first, I think. And that just at the moment, there is no kind of overall scheme for people to find out what there is. There is the advertising from the various providers, but that's more like the competition that we had before we established the learning shop in 2000, which turned competition into cooperation and gave an overall view of the whole curriculum. So really the theme is coherence and accessibility of information. But thank you very much for your responses.
No, thank you, Alan. It's very well said, and it's a point that's taken. We will seriously have a look at what it is that we can contribute, if only in signposting where information and opportunity can be found the way you've described it. So thank you very much indeed. Absolutely last, but never least, Councillor Lewis, Paris.
Good evening, Cabinet. Welcome. I hope you're settling in and enjoying your new jobs. I'm enjoying mine. I'm here tonight to say a few words about the levelling up paper before you, and I realise it's early stages yet. Obviously, it's an really exciting opportunity for Colchester, bidding for £20 million of additional monies to enhance our life. It's a great thing, and no doubt it will be an opportunity to build on the good work that the We Are Colchester board have done with multiple very exciting projects. It sounds like a lot of money, but it's not, is it? And I guess that's the challenge. And I mean, some people were ecstatic about all of the We Are Colchester projects. Some people, and me included, thought perhaps we'd missed a couple of tricks. And I will say it for the record, I think that the Victorians left Ipswich with a really great asset in a wet dock. And that has made a huge impact on the urban renaissance of the waterfront in Ipswich. And it's the reason why Brewdog are moving there soon and not to the Hive in Colchester. Though we do have water in the hive in Colchester, just not in the right place. And I do wonder if we need to keep on our agenda the concept of looking at a wet dock in the future, if not a fully wet dock, just a quasi wet dock, because people don't want to sit next to mud. They do want to sit next to water. The other thing that was omitted from the town fund bid, which I think you will agree we need to find a way of doing more on, is the Roman circus site. And I raise it tonight because in looking at the map very specifically before you in the paper, you know the red line is clear, but very close to that red line on the southern boundary is the Roman circus site. And I don't think we can, I don't think also the master plan that Essex County Council and you're going to be working on, I don't think we can exclude the reality of the Roman circus site being there, particularly given that one of the three strands levelling up the agenda is heritage and culture. Now, for me, I've always said it, and I take nothing away from those that want a military museum, a Civil War museum, all of that stuff's great as well. But for me, the Roman era is the lowest hanging fruit because it is Colchester's USP. And that's why I think we should put some focus on that. I think you should support the paper in front of you. I think it's right to focus energies into that part of Colchester. I like some of what I've seen, and I think it's going to be a really exciting venture. I do wonder though if the red line can be a bit flexible, because I note that the NCP and the bingo site isn't within. I also note that, for example, you've got a primary school nearby that's constrained on its site. It would, I believe, be interested in looking at how it could expand in the very, very long run, and it wouldn't be on that site. They also have the lease of the field outside first site. So I think it's a really complicated area with lots of landowners involved, but we need to be mindful of all of that and how it can kind of come together. And then obviously, I note the news, County Council are seeking to buy some land outside First Site, which has been an interesting set of conversations over recent years. That is an opportunity, isn't it, to also have a refresh and consider how we can have a bus station that works for Colchester, how we can have a bus station that means that my mum, who's getting on a coach to Victoria in London, can get picked up in a car late at night because there is no other bus to go on to. And I know we're not the Transport Authority, and I'll put it on record now. I agree with the likes of Councillor Scordis and many of you around here. You know, I can't get home tonight on a bus. I live 6 miles that way on the just off the A134. It's a main road, but the bus service isn't an option for me. We also have in Colchester a huge collection of disjointed cycle lanes. It's an embarrassment that you can go down to Meander Mews on a bicycle and there's a massive new flat surface of asphalt lit by Essex Highways lights, and it's a dead end. And there are other examples of that. So there's loads of work that we know we've got to do. But I think generally speaking, what you've got before you is to be welcomed. I've said it to you before, and not everyone would have heard it. I'll say it again. If you go for a wander in the city of Lincoln and look at what they did around their train station, multi-storey car park, brand new bus station, and a gateway into the Victorian shopping and retail. It's transformative. We can do better than that, and I think we probably will in time. So go for it.
Thank you very much, Darius. Pat.
Yes, thank you, Darius. I agree with pretty much everything you've said there. I would like to explore the possibility of moving that red line to include the Roman circus site. I think it would be worth having an exploration of at least the possibility of that, because we've dropped the ball on it once or twice already. This is really, for me, one of the last chance saloons here with the Abro site being sold behind it. There's a huge opportunity for a meaningful public realm strategy there, but it needs to be connected to the other really, really good public realm strategies that we've got going in the town centre. It will forever be the poor relation, and we will be the poorer for it if it remains that way. So look forward to chatting with you more about that.
Thank you. If there's no other comments, I'd like to respond to you, Darius, if I may, and in a way wrapped paper. You've done a great intro for me. I'll scrapple my own notes. No need for them. This is, let's be frank, a great opportunity, but, and the but's pretty big. This is just the beginning of the process. The way this is described, I think, fits what we understand, which is do it at pace, do it to the criteria. No point doing it as we would like it to be, because that's not necessarily going to help us. But that said, this opportunity in the way it's described, regeneration and plus more alive to culture and heritage, is something that we should seize. And I think there's enough room from my perspective in the way this is described as a paper for us to ask officers to revisit some of the points that have been made. And Councillor Cox, I understand the point you've reinforced too. You've mentioned this in your first moments and joining Cabinet, the importance of that particular the Roman circus. But let's just keep our feet on the ground, beginning of the process. And we know ourselves, don't we, from Town Deal Fund, how having worked cross-party, which is the way we must do this as well, nonetheless, we still fell short of what we would hope to have. So I think we'd just be really practical about this. And yes, let's run at it at pace. So thank you for your remarks. I absolutely get them. It's the way we should want to work, not necessarily in public in here, although that will do, but with each other, building on the inheritance. I said this before you, I think, arrived, that each administration takes from the other. And indeed, this starting point was crafted up at pace by officers as we arrived. It was work in progress. So it's your work and our work, and it's our work together for the people of Colchester. And so thank you for the remarks. We'll take on board what we can. Darius.
Thank you for that. Very comforting. And thank you, Councillor Cox, for taking a particular interest in the Roman circus site. I realise that the South Way is a big psychological barrier for a lot of people. But we've got to accept that there is a bigger picture here, and we can't work in piecemeal. The Abro site's happening. It's going to be residential. But where green space happens within that is a conversation still to be had. And, you know, I just think that if we can find a way to get that road that currently drives over the Roman circus shifted, then we could unlock the public realm of the circus site just in the way they do in Rome with Circus Maximus. And that will be not just an asset for Colchester, for the people that live in Abro, but for people coming here, spending money here. And that's what we want. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Darius. Cabinet will move to decision unless there's any other remarks that need to be made. Paper is in front of us. Now I go to paragraph 2 and recommendations about endorsing the scope as described, agreeing to further work. Really important point we didn't make plain earlier. This has to be with this constituency of our parliamentary constituency, so it's has to be endorsed by our MP. I'm sure some of that work's underway, but absolutely essential. It's a reinforcement that we understand that this is collective work cross-party as described earlier. So as per 2.1, as described, I'll put it to you for your approval. Thank you all very much. Cantering through the agenda. Appointments to external organisations and council groups. Richard, I think you have a couple of remarks to make.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is the annual report that comes to this meeting every week, appointments to various outside bodies and council groups. The details are set out in the report on the various appendices. There are still just a couple outstanding, Chair, so you might want to amend the decision just to delegate approval of those two to the relevant group leaders.
So good to note. I'm sure colleagues agree. We just need to close this. If there's nothing else to add, it's a really interesting read for those who like that kind of thing. We'll go to the recommendations, which are in effect to take as listed the representatives to the various external organisations and council groups, to authorise the leader of the council on your behalf to make a determination whether that's needed, to appoint me as the Armed Forces champion, and to note the reports about the work undertaken by appointees to external organisations in 21-22 as set out in the Appendix B. Are we content to so agree? Thank you. Now for a different one. Land acquisition for development as part of the council's new house building programme. We would have had Julie Young talk to this about this land purchase agreement for Brownfield land in the town centre, which I think is really exciting. I'll go to you, Councillor Fogg.
Thank you very much, Leader. Happy to give you a break for a moment. I know Councillor Young would have introduced this paper as the portfolio holder were she here, but I think this is another really exciting opportunity for us. It builds on the work that the council has already done in having committed itself to deliver 350 social homes owned by the council over 5 years, and provides, and this is a new opportunity for us on Brownfield land in the town centre to provide between 20 and 29 1- and 2-bedroom apartments. And of course, this plays very much to the paper we were just discussing on levelling, fits into that particular area. It's an area of the town centre where the council already has a number of interests in land ownership, as does county council. And really, this is an opportunity for us to create additional genuinely affordable housing, as we're discussing, to ensure that the town centre provides opportunities for really high quality living, and important for a vibrant town centre, central to our local economy as well. We know the challenges that there are in town centres and high streets around retail, but one of the solutions to that is to have more people living in the town centre, and this opportunity is there for us, and providing that genuinely affordable housing for people plays to our priority around the cost of living. If we can provide more opportunities for people to live in accommodation that is genuinely affordable, then we need to take them. So I'd move to the recommendation set out in section 2 of the paper, and that would pursue this opportunity for land ownership and a development opportunity for the council as well.
Thank you very much. Brilliantly done. Right, next item of our agenda relates to environmental sustainability and the river strategy. Councillor Laws, I think you wanted to talk to this.
Thank you, Leader. I even did my homework by venturing onto the River Cone on Saturday to help lift out some shopping trolleys. Brilliant to see this on the agenda. I've always felt that the river, the middle section of the Colne, I think that's how it's described, the section that runs through historic Colchester, poses a really good opportunity for leisure and potentially for tourism. It has its huge challenges though, doesn't it? At the moment, I would implore you to take time over the summer, go for a little wander around the old Lido, built in the 1930s at Bellevue Road. Have a look at that. Have a look at what could be done there. It's got a huge concrete base. It's never very deep and it's always got water in it. It has become rather wild. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but with that, you need management of it. The reeds are really dense around Cymbeline Meadows. That makes it pretty impassable for leisure. And actually, I was thinking the other day, wouldn't it be an interesting exploration about seeing what you could do maybe at Spring Lane, where the old nursery site is, which is, I believe, not really doing a lot. Actually, I mean, look over the border in Suffolk or what's happened at Catawade, where they've built what's called Constable Park, and it's a kayak and canoe centre, entirely private. But we've got the advantage of having the land, and it's not very far away from the Bellevue Road site onto Middleborough and into Lower Castle Park. So it could be an exciting thing to look at. The reeds would need a bit of clearance though. The park rangers have been working really hard over the last year or two, I understand, in helping with the weir at Middlemill to flush the river through to get the azola out, which is great. So that's good news for the fish who suffered before when that invasive species went absolutely crazy. I think you need to also engage and keep engaging with the canoe club. They do have access to pots of money. They're a wonderful bunch of people. In fact, they're out tonight at 6 o'clock every Wednesday. You can go along. I think for £5, they'll take you out for a couple of hours. They're fully insured. They know what they're doing. It's all safe stuff. But what saddens me is that, you know, if you are particularly young or particularly old and maybe delicate, or if you are disabled, you can't get in the water properly because we don't really have the portage. And it's not really a very expensive thing to do. And I just think that around that Bellevue Road site, and before someone says to me, oh yeah, but there's no car park on there. I mean, you know, people went there in the 1930s and got on really well. I think we could pull it off. There's an opportunity there. The canoe club at the moment are based in the old pump room. They don't even have a toilet. They go for a wee around the back of it. It's not good enough. You know, we're a city about to be. This is a really key asset for us. And I just think it'd be wonderful just if people can use the river as a leisure tool at the weekends and when visiting Colchester into Lower Castle Park. I'm also cognizant, and the free marketeer in me has been reined in, because you know you can't just let the completely commercialized. You've got to be sensitive to the other wildlife there, the fish, the nesting birds, the swans. You also have to be mindful that an 18-year-old Darius and his mates, after 4 cans of hooch and a few Stellas, would have hired a kayak and have gone down towards East Hill, not necessarily knowing about the sluice and how deep that drop is to the seawater. And that would be life-changing. So we have to be really careful about that. It has to be managed sensitively. But I think it's a really big opportunity if we get it right. And I'd encourage you to go and look with your own eyes and keep going on it.
Thank you. Any immediate remarks? If not, then I'll respond to you, to Darius. As always, you provide, even for me as a person who has no sense at all, picture of a kind of an 18-year-old Darius, and I'm sure we would have all had good fun together, Darius, and we might have gone over the sluice together. And that perhaps an analogy for the way in which we're going to work together as we go ahead over the sluice together, Darius. Personally, I've got a particular interest in some meadows, which you made a reference. We did start off, and I think the last administration started to do some work on that. And that's one of those things that we've, between us, have agreed to go back to explore. So I think there's a context piece here. Now, our position on the policy panel recommendation is, of course, to accept what they've said, which is to start to develop a strategy. Officers have made connections with the University of Essex and others to start doing some piloting work with the business school. That's all to the good. So we have to acknowledge it's the beginning, but at least the beginning is going to be made. And ideas, and you've given us some, and drawing in others from others is absolutely the only way in which we sort of map out a forward path. Now, water available at the quay in an Ipswich style, wouldn't we like that? But I think by stage we can do, I think we might agree on this, the possibilities and can't make the differences. And it goes back to a point that we made in the earlier paper, and I know that you'll be absolutely up for this, which is about quality of life. Quality of life is more than stuff, and nice though that is about open and accessible space, not too commercialized, your point to play back to you. And so, thank you for your remarks and your support. Yet one more thing, which I believe in a cross-party way, we can make non-contentious, and frankly, let's just say it out there, enjoyable to develop some things which have a benefit for future young Dariuses, as well as yourself now, in your current state, Darius. Thank you very much. Thank you for all help every evening. So I'm trying to shepherd myself, let alone everybody else. Yes, let's go to the recommendation, which is to accept what's been put to us from the Environment and Sustainability Panel around development of a policy panel for development of a strategy for green and blue space. Agreed? Agreed. Thank you. All right. Now we can go to the next item, We can agree. Thank you, officers. Environment and Sustainability Panel meeting of the 22nd of March has been put to us, which is Community Engagement and Climate Emergency Update. Now, we would have expected our good colleague, Councillor Steph Nissen, to address this, but she can't join us, but she has given us her views. And the essence of this, and it was a good conversation, and Councillor Corey and I were, among others, were party to it, was that we do an awful lot of good things around environment and sustainability, but actually trying to track them and find them. The sources that they are linked to is no easy matter. So the position has been put to us as cabinet, that what we should do is restart, if you like, kind of a separate website. That's not the view of Councillor Nissen, and it's not the view I put to you. But we take absolutely the principle. Let me talk to what she's given us as advice. And she says that there is a substantial amount of excellent information already available online about the climate emergency. She says the same thing. No one starts daunting. Communicating useful, easy to follow information and helpful tips can be improved. An aspect of that is more outreach and social media promotion and media engagement. Research by officers into how the council's website's used shows it's mainly used for completing transactions, misbins and so on, rather than seeking information. But rather than a separate website, she proposes that we should agree that we enhance and update our existing web pages and go from there. So underneath sustainability and climate action, and that would be more effective and efficient in terms of user engagement and resource and the creation of a separate website. I have to say, I do agree with that. It could incorporate links to websites and partner organisations. I think that's a smart thing to go and do. It would help members of the public who come to us to find and access trusted content. And the proposition is further that search functionality would be improved so that it's difficult sometimes when you go to a website, that when you look for something that you then go and find it. So more hits on websites and more accessibility. Steph also recommends to us that work is linked to what we're doing elsewhere on spreading awareness of work and environmental news. And some of that should be done in a more in-person way, working with others to increase our reach, such as Community 360 and Eco Colchester, the latter of whom has excellent web pages and social media pages. So the recommendation is to signpost people to them from our website for further environmental information that's relevant to Colchester. Other additional initiatives which will increase resident engagement include increasing our outreach through events and communications, whether it's organisations or individuals working with the community team at the council, and continuing to provide opportunities. And I think this is a really important thing for residents to take part in work on climate action, such as Woodland and Biodiversity Project, as well as to facilitate communities themselves through the Community CAN as asset-based community development approach. So the recommendation is we support this approach as just described, which accepts the critique that was made in the Environment and Sustainability Panel and sets out ways in which we could do better. Please.
Can I just say, I'm the opposite of you, David. I visualise all sorts of things, but I can't necessarily read them particularly well. And as you were speaking, I saw the page and I saw the buttons and I thought, where is that one? It's missing. And I'm sorry to criticise ourselves, but sometimes I find the way you navigate our websites particularly difficult and unuser friendly. And I think the first piece of work we should do is look at some sample groups and look at the fastest questions that they ask, and to make sure that when we look to produce those pages, that we do it from those kind of really obvious questions. So my first one was, where can I get a green grant? I wouldn't go to our website for information about biodiversity. I would go somewhere else, but I would go to our website to find out if I can get a green grant to put, whatever into a facility that I was looking at. So I just think we need to look at the logic of how to set that out before we launch into it as a project.
Please, Pam.
Just very briefly, I'm coming at this from the university perspective of user engagement of websites, and it's a perennial problem, but I think there's a lot to be gained from having a real look at how user experience is going with the council website, and how more could it be more interactive at many levels, and could it have a more well, it'd be interesting to scope the searches. What are people searching for? Do we analyse what they're looking for already? Where are those stats?
We use the word sustainable as opposed to what everybody else in the world is looking at is climate emergency, and it's keyword, and we tend to use our language as opposed to what's happening sort of in the real world.
Mark.
Just to offer a bit of explanation, I used to have the website under my remit when I was leader, 12 months ago now. So David, it may be better than you. The functionality of the website continually needs to be improved. That is accepted. The officers do work very hard, and it is overall a good website, and it's driven by what residents use most. And that's why recycling is at the top. You then find planning second, and it works that way down. So they do it based on the need, and that's where the data then means these bits come to the top. I have complained before, and they have accepted the search functionality is good enough. So I do support the comments that have been made, and I think we need to make sure that there's a very clear and separate section, a very clear button, as Andrea said, for sustainability, for climate change, etc., looking at the right terminology, because this is a fantastic part of what we do, and it's got to be even more so what we do going forward, bringing people together. So I just wanted to add a bit of that information.
Thank you. Taking that all together to make it possible, Richard, for you to give a response back to the panel, would you send them our thanks for the recommendation, which in the sense of making improvements and change for better in terms of accessibility of environment and sustainability information in the Want to Be Better, is accepted. The way is as described. Be grateful if you could put back to the panel members not only our thanks but some sense of how we'll do this, but add into that we will include in that the user experience to guide us. I think that actually should be first and last, being practical about it. Or that they will see that is in the spirit of the conversations of the panel. Are we so agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay. Item 10, neighbourhood services and waste, and a recommendation. Councillor Goss, you want to pick that up?
Yeah, so I picked this up in my first portfolio holder briefing because the recycling rate is something I've been very passionate about and have certainly been holding the previous administration's feet to the fire on. Under previous leadership, which happened to be under me, we got to 56%. I think that was our highest ever recycling rate pre-COVID. Obviously, the world has changed, and in effect, more waste is being generated because people are at home. They're not in the office, they're at home working. I'm working at home 5 days a week, pretty much. I'm supposed to be in on a Wednesday, but I always seem to find an excuse that I can't go in. But that means I'm generating more waste at home as well and trying to recycle it. So what officers have done is they've recommended through the scrutiny panel that we go up to 55% as our target, which in the current climate is a real stretch, given that we've been languishing at around about 52%. And I did have an interesting debate with the previous portfolio holder, because they did say they'd got to 53%, but actually they'd only got to 52.91%. That is actually on our website today. Now, of course, you round up as you go over 52.5, but so, you know, we're in that sort of 53% category just. We will have to go for behaviour change if we are to get recycling to really push. If you remember in the bad old days, we were languishing at the bottom of the Essex League table, sort of 11th or 12th, quite embarrassing. I think only tendering was below us. This is going back a few years. We changed the approach, rolled out wheelie bins, stopped people having more than 3 back sacks a fortnight. It's worked, it's behaviour change. And we push it to a record of 56%, and we went up from about 42, 43%, which was frankly dreadful. We've plateaued. That's not unusual. all other councils go through. We've had a massive increase of 13% success up on our recycling, but we're plateaued, and COVID has stepped us back a bit. So as part of the strategic work, we will have to go for some more direct education and behaviour change to achieve these targets and go beyond 55, 56% that we've achieved in the past. So watch out for that, and hopefully what we've got planned to push us back in the right direction and learn from what others have also done using education and the law to encourage more recycling.
Thank you very much. No other comments. I know that we all feel strongly about this. We want to be the best, frankly, don't we? And we know government's raising the game for us. Are they not, Martin? And our response is going to, that frankly, ability to respond is going to be a really big challenge for us as for others. So to be the best is the aim. Right. So the recommendation is that campaign and push to achieve reduction. Clearly, we're accepting their recommendations for the record. Agreed?
Agreed.
Right, thank you. In which case we go on to neighbourhood services and waste. We've done, I beg your pardon. We go on to sale plot 600, the Crescent. Mark.
Thank you. I'll be brief. This is quite straightforward. This is the sale of plot 600, the Crescent on the Colchester Business Park. But I believe we have a have your say contribution from Councillor Gerald Oxford.
Right, thank you for the reminder to us. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Gerald Oxford has just submitted some comments which he wished to read out at this stage. Dear Cabinet, I am unable to be with you this evening as I'm in the briefing for next week's local plan. I wanted to speak on the above item on the agenda, which is wholly my ward, Highwoods. Reading the agenda, it states a capital receipt will be received by the council, and I feel a significant proportion of this capital receipt should go towards the St Mark's Community project, added to the £1.8 million already secured. Sadly, because of delays by Amphora going out to tender 4 months late, they are likely to come in higher than they otherwise would. An additional capital receipt would ensure the centre would go ahead and without any reduction of quality of design and materials. Without this additional money, the project is at risk as the trustees are not going to sign the lease if quality and materials are reduced, as they would be responsible for the maintenance going forward. The end of the statement, Chairman.
Thank you. Mark, please.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Councillor Oxford. Actually, I will pass some of that back to you, Leader, because I know you've been in discussions with Councillor Oxford on that particular matter. So I'll just outline the simplicity of the action we had this evening, but also some of my understanding and ways that I'd like to mitigate the way the site works. So the sale of plot 600, I just passed the plot the other day. It's part of the business park. It's something we've been marketing for a number of years. It is down as employment land in the local plan, so it is to be used for that reason. And I am pleased to say that we have an increased offer for this site over previous offers. The precise detail and costings will be in the confidential item later. But I would say that this is a good deal for the people of Colchester, for our finances, and to enable for us to invest in further acquisitions, developments for affordable, proper affordable housing, and also to look at other projects where we want to buy further land. What I would say is this site hasn't been developed before, so there is on that site. I spoke today with officers about ensuring to keep some of that greenery, which is in planning policy, a 10% uplift in sort of tree cover and a biodiversity net gain. I did express my concern because biodiversity net gain cannot always be the best way forward. We don't want to destroy stuff and then try and replant it elsewhere. We want to mitigate as much as possible with the greenery on that site. And I actually feel, I know you'll answer Councillor Oxford's concerns going forward, but I feel there's some mitigation with the receipt of this site could go towards further greening elsewhere or other biodiversity projects if we lose some on this site. But I recommend this to Cabinet as a logical step forward and sale of this project. Councillor Key.
Let's take the recommendation, shall we? And then I'll address what isn't a related issue. which is the St Mark's Community Centre, but it has been raised with us publicly and privately by Councillor Oxford. So the recommendation here is to agree to delegate approval, approve the final terms and conclude the sale. And you're recommending that, Mark. Or should we agree? Thank you. Right, the issue raised by Councillor Oxford about St Mark's Communities Centre is of course driven by his understandable concern to ensure that the centre is delivered and that it's of quality that would work for the people of Highwoods and for neighbouring communities such as my own in Mile End. We've had a number of exchanges and conversations about this, but as it's been raised publicly, I'll just say this, we are still committed to delivering that community centre. But we're in a process of tenders. They have to be received. We have to have to scrutinise them as you'd expect to be good practice to see that they have the quality, that they meet the standard that was agreed with those with whom Council Oxford has been working. So more comment than that is not really necessary at this point. It was this administration in its two-party form that agreed to support this project 18 months, 2 years ago. So we are today where we were then, which is trying to see this happen. It's had an uplift in our time away from office. That may or may not prove sufficient. We'll find out in due course, but I have given on your and our behalf an assurance to Councillor Oxford as in the terms I've just given it, which is we remain committed to delivering community facilities where we made that promise. But the conversation about exactly what, how and when, that's on receipt of the tenders, and that's for later. Am I right on this? Thank you. In which case, we go to exclusion of public, as we have the confidential items to address next. I have some language to find on some of these many sheets of paper. I move the following motion. I've had the nod I need. I move that in accordance with section 100A brackets 4 close brackets of the Local Government Act 1992, in accordance with the local authorities' executive arrangements, meetings and access to information in England in a series of brackets, regulations 2012, the public, including members of the press, be excluded from the meeting for the following items as they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 to the Local Government Act 1972, and I should give this duty to the deputy leader.
I thought I'd got that.
Right, as our live